The wind howled through the towering pines of Black Hollow Forest, a ghostly cry that matched the chill in Forest Ranger Ethan Cole's bones. It was dusk, orange light fading to bruised purple, and every shadow seemed to move with purpose. Ethan moved in silence, his boots crunching gently on the moss-covered trail as he studied the freshly broken branches ahead. His trained eyes scanned the forest floor. Tracks. Not animal. Human. Recent. He crouched, running calloused fingers over the disturbed earth. Someone had been here. Multiple people. He followed the trail deeper into the woods, thoughts racing. For months now, there had been reports, whispers, really, of illegal poaching, of endangered trees being cut and wildlife vanishing. When he tried to follow up, he was met with silence. Local hunters wouldn't talk. His own superiors dismissed his concerns, chalking them up to Ethan being too intense again. But he knew something was wrong, and tonight, a new anonymous message had come through the ranger station. They're moving in deeper. If you want the truth, go to Sector 12, alone. He should have told someone, should have called backup, but stubborn pride and a gut feeling had driven him out here. He needed proof. Now, as he followed the signs off the marked trail and into forbidden territory, Ethan felt the air grow heavier. The trees pressed closer together. This was the restricted zone, a place left untouched for decades, a sanctuary. Suddenly, a rustling behind him. Too loud for a bird, too fast for deer. He turned. Too late. Something slammed into him from behind. Pain exploded in his ribs. He hit the ground hard, the wind knocked from his lungs. Before he could react, a black sack was pulled over his head, and heavy blows rained down. "Think you're a hero, huh?" A voice snarled near his ear. Rough hands dragged him through the brush. He struggled, but another strike to the head sent stars bursting behind his eyes. His wrists were yanked behind him. Something cold and sharp cinched around them. The bag was yanked off. He blinked, dazed, and looked up. 3 men stood over him, faces covered by masks fashioned from old burlap sacks and camouflage netting. One held a machete, the other a hunting rifle. The third, the largest, was already securing a thick chain around Ethan's torso, binding him to a massive pine tree. The metal dug into his ribs, unforgiving and tight. "You should have stayed out of our business, Ranger," the biggest one said, his voice cold. Ethan spat blood onto the ground. "You're making a big mistake." The rifleman chuckled. "No, you did. Coming here alone. Real stupid." They didn't ask him questions, didn't demand information. This wasn't an interrogation. It was a warning, and they intended for it to be permanent. "You'll die here," the machete wielder said, stepping closer. "Just like the others who got too curious." Ethan froze. The others? But before he could speak, a gloved hand slapped duct tape across his mouth. The men stepped back, surveying their handiwork. The chain was tight, looped around both Ethan and the tree several times, the padlock cruelly secure. "We'll be back in a couple days, if anything's left of you," one of them said with a sneer. And just like that, they vanished into the trees. Time passed in a blur. The forest grew darker, colder. Hours melted together like oil on water. Ethan's body ached. Blood trickled from his temple, mixing with sweat. His mouth was dry, aching with thirst. He couldn't call out. He couldn't move. Every muscle screamed in pain. His wrists were numb. Bugs crawled across his boots. The distant hoot of an owl reminded him how utterly alone he was. No one knew he was here. He tried to fight sleep, but exhaustion took over. Then, a branch snapped. His eyes opened. More rustling. Closer. A silhouette moved between the trees. Massive. Fluid. Silent. His heart slammed in his chest. No. Please, no. The shape stepped into the clearing. A bear. A full-grown grizzly, easily over 600 pounds. Its fur was thick and matted, brown flecked with gray. Its shoulders swayed as it walked, muscles rippling beneath the coat. Ethan's breath caught. He froze. He'd seen bears before, from afar, from safety, but never like this. Never this close. The bear stopped just 20 feet away, head lifted, sniffing the air. It smells the blood, Ethan thought, panic rushing through him. His fingers gripped the chain instinctively, knowing it was useless. He couldn't run, couldn't fight. The bear moved forward. 10 feet. 5. Ethan's entire body tensed, every nerve screaming, "This is it." This was how it ended. Mauled, shredded in the middle of nowhere. He tried to press himself into the bark of the tree as if he could vanish, but the bear didn't charge. It didn't growl. It stopped. Its massive head tilted slightly, eyes locked onto Ethan's. Then it made a sound, low, deep, a rumbling huff from its chest. Not a warning, not aggression, something else. Ethan blinked. The bear took another step, then another, slowly, carefully. Its eyes never left his. They were soft, intelligent, curious. It was now barely 3 feet from him. So close Ethan could smell its earthy musk, could see the scars along its shoulder, the patch of fur missing from its ear. He stopped breathing altogether. The bear leaned forward, nose twitching. And then it let out another sound, softer this time, almost like a whine. Ethan's fear twisted into confusion. What the hell is going on? Then, slowly, the bear extended one massive paw, gently, toward the chain that bound him. Cliffhanger. Ethan's eyes widened as the bear's claws grazed the padlock. Was it trying to help? Or was this the beginning of something far more unimaginable? The bear's gaze met his again, unblinking, unspoken, but Ethan could feel it, something ancient, something unbreakable. The chain rattled as the bear moved closer. The bear didn't attack. It circled slowly, heavy paws making almost no sound on the forest floor. Its immense body shifted with grace, not menace. Every step was measured, deliberate. Eyes still locked on Ethan. Ethan tried to stay still, though every instinct screamed at him to brace for a sudden lunge, to prepare for tearing claws and crushing jaws. But the grizzly did something no training, no wildlife documentary, no survival manual could have ever prepared him for. It sat down, right in front of him, not 5 feet away, just sat. A lumbering exhale rose from its chest as it settled, like the sigh of an old soldier returning to familiar ground. Its dark eyes remained fixed on Ethan, curious, calm. Ethan stared, trembling. The pain in his ribs, the parched burn in his throat, the dull pulse in his skull, none of it mattered. All that existed was this impossible moment. His heart thudded wildly. And then, through the fog of blood loss and fear, memories began to surface. A forest, a different one. Long ago. He was just a boy then, maybe 8, lost for hours in Yellowstone after slipping away from his parents' campsite, terrified, crying beneath a fallen log. And then, a bear. He remembered the eyes, not the snarl of a predator, but the patient stillness of a guardian. It hadn't harmed him. It had simply watched, kept the wolves at bay that circled nearby. When the rangers found him, the bear was gone. No one believed his story. Now, with breath trembling from pain and dehydration, Ethan whispered, hoarse as a dying wind, "You again?" The bear tilted its head. Delirium, a hallucination, or destiny. Ethan couldn't tell the difference anymore. The hours crept by like ghosts. Night thickened around them. Insects sang. The moon rose, casting silver blades through the treetops. The bear, still seated near Ethan, remained vigilant. Once, a fox approached from the underbrush, its eyes glinting as it drew close to Ethan's still form. The bear rose, one step forward. A deep grunt. The fox bolted. Later, crows circled overhead, cawing greedily. The bear bared its teeth and let out a guttural roar. They scattered into the trees. Ethan drifted in and out of consciousness. Fever dreams twisted around him, but each time his eyes fluttered open, the bear was still there, watching, waiting. At some point, something gently nudged his leg. He blinked against the sweat stinging his eyes. The bear stood over him again. It leaned down, then backed away. Something rolled toward Ethan's hand, a stick. Skewered onto it. Small berries. Forest berries. He stared, blinking. No way. The bear let out a low huff and settled again as if satisfied. Moments later, another nudge at his side. He turned his head weakly. A plastic object tapped against his hand. His old metal water bottle. He hadn't even noticed it had fallen when he was captured. The bear had brought it back. The cap was still on, but inside was a bit of water, barely enough to wet his mouth. He struggled to uncork it, and a bit of liquid dribbled into his cracked lips. Relief. His throat burned as he whispered, "You're helping me?" He could barely speak. His lips felt thick and useless. The bear gazed at him again, and Ethan, his mind swimming between pain and awe, managed to whisper, "Shadow." The name came from nowhere, or maybe from deep inside him. "You're Shadow." The bear made no sound, but it didn't object. Elsewhere in the forest, not far from that strange circle of man and beast, a pair of binoculars lowered slowly. "He's still alive?" the rifleman muttered. From their hidden vantage point behind thick brush and ferns, the three poachers watched in utter disbelief. "How the hell is that bear not tearing him apart?" The big one, the leader, growled. "Maybe it's sick," the machete wielder muttered. "Or old, confused." "No," the leader spat. "It's watching him, protecting him." The rifleman tilted his head, unnerved, like it knows him. A long silence. Then the leader snapped, "We finish this tonight. If anyone finds him, they find us. You two follow me, be quiet." Back at the clearing, the air had shifted. Shadow was restless. He rose from his seated position, nostrils flaring. His ears twitched toward the distant trees. A low growl escaped his chest. Ethan stirred, sensing the tension. "What is it?" he whispered. The bear circled him once, then again, eyes scanning the trees. Something was coming. Shadow moved toward the edge of the clearing, vanishing into the darkness. Ethan's body screamed from stillness. Muscles numb, his heart pounded with dread. Minutes passed. Silence. Then, snap. A branch. Close. Too close. Then a whisper. "It's time." The voice came from behind the trees. Another crunch of boots on leaves. Then another. And another. Ethan's breath hitched. They were back. The shadows moved with purpose now. Boots pressed into damp moss. Blades whispered against pants. One man carried a rifle with a cracked wooden stock, another twirled a machete like it was a toy, and the third, the leader, had a short-barreled shotgun slung over one shoulder and bloodlust burning in his eyes. They advanced toward the clearing with the measured cruelty of hunters who'd already decided how their prey would die. Ethan's head lolled forward. His mind was a storm of dehydration and pain, but instinct screamed louder than reason. "They're here." The first voice broke through the trees, low, mocking. "Well, well," the machete wielder sneered. "Still alive. What a stubborn cockroach." Ethan didn't respond. He couldn't, not with the rusted chain biting into his wrist and blood drying like crust around his eyes. He could barely keep his head up. The leader stepped into the moonlight, towering over him. "Didn't I tell you what happens to people who don't mind their business?" He raised the shotgun. Ethan's eyes fluttered shut. This is it. But before the man could pull the trigger, a thunderous roar shattered the night. It echoed through the forest like a cannon blast, primal, deep, furious. The poachers froze. The machete slipped from one man's hand. "What the—" The rifleman started, and then Shadow came. A blur of muscle and rage, the grizzly burst through the underbrush like a freight train. teeth bared, eyes locked on the shotgun. There was no hesitation, no mercy. The leader turned just in time to be slammed by several 100 pounds of fury. His shotgun flew from his hands. His body tumbled like a rag doll and crashed into a tree. He didn't rise. The machete wielder screamed and bolted into the trees, crashing blindly into the darkness. The rifleman raised his weapon, but it was too late. Shadow lunged. The man fired. A flash. A crack. Shadow disappeared into the brush. Silence. The rifleman stumbled back, eyes wide, breath hitching. What the hell was that thing? He fled. Branches snapped behind him as the forest swallowed his retreat. In the eerie calm that followed, Ethan lay dazed in the dirt. He didn't understand what had happened, only that the bear had saved him again. He blinked. Something had landed near his leg. A large, jagged branch, its tip broken into a crude spear. Shadow must have dropped it before vanishing. He brought it for me, Ethan realized. Fueled by something deeper than adrenaline, pure will, Ethan twisted his body, dragging the branch toward the rusted lock binding his left wrist. He wedged the branch's tip into the locking mechanism using all his weight. Pain exploded in his shoulder, but the lock gave way with a snap. One hand free, then the other. Blood trickled from raw wrists, but freedom dulled the pain. He rolled to his knees, coughing violently, and reached for his vest pocket. Tucked beneath a torn flap, his flare gun, hidden during the ambush, forgotten by the poachers. He lifted it skyward with trembling hands. Fired. Whom? A red streak of light soared above the treetops, bursting like a blood-red firework in the night. A call for help. A last, desperate hope. But hope didn't last long. Behind him, footsteps. Heavy, fast, the rifleman, face twisted, shirt torn, blood on his forehead. He held a hunting knife now, long, curved, and gleaming in the moonlight. "You think you're walking away from this?" he growled. Ethan barely had time to turn. The man tackled him, sending both of them crashing to the forest floor. The knife slashed down, grazing Ethan's shoulder. He cried out, twisting beneath the man's weight, grappling for control. "I'll make it slow," the man hissed. "The bear should have finished you, but now I get to—" A roar split the night again. Closer, louder. The man froze. Too late. Shadow exploded from the trees. Blood streaked his fur. He had been hit by the rifle, but he was unstoppable. He rammed into the man, teeth clamping onto the attacker's arm. Bones snapped. The man screamed. Shadow slammed him to the ground and stood over him, growling with such ferocity that the very trees seemed to shudder. The poacher rolled away, bleeding and screaming, and vanished into the underbrush, fleeing into the blackness from which he'd come. Then it was quiet again. Shadow turned. Ethan was on the ground, shaking, bleeding. He looked up into those dark, ancient eyes. "You saved me," he whispered. The bear didn't move, didn't growl, just watched. Ethan's hand reached out, trembling, bloodied. It hovered inches from the creature's chest. "Why?" he whispered. The bear stepped closer. The distance disappeared. Ethan exhaled, exhausted. "Thank you, Shadow." And then his eyes fluttered shut. His head fell to the side. The whirring began minutes later. Faint at first, growing louder. Helicopter blades. A light swept through the treetops, then pierced the clearing. Voices shouted, "Over here!" "He's down! Check for vitals!" Ethan stirred as boots pounded the earth around him. Strong hands lifted him onto a stretcher. EMTs began triage, barking commands over radio static. A ranger with a gray beard leaned down. "You're okay now, son. We got you. We saw the flare." Ethan coughed weakly. "The bear. What bear?" He pointed feebly toward the trees. But there was nothing there. No tracks, no movement, no sound. The brush was undisturbed. The rangers exchanged confused glances. "There's no bear here," one muttered. But Ethan tried to sit up. He was right there. He saved me." The medic pressed gently on his chest. "You're hallucinating. Your body's in shock." "No," Ethan whispered. "He was real." His eyes scanned the trees one last time as the stretcher was lifted into the chopper. Still, nothing. Just the deep, eternal hush of the forest. The white hospital walls were far too sterile for someone who had danced so closely with death. Ethan Carter lay on the firm mattress, eyes adjusting slowly to the fluorescence above. His ribs ached. His legs felt like lead. Bandages wrapped around his abdomen, evidence of the deep gashes the doctors said narrowly missed vital organs. But he was alive, and the news was everywhere. Forest ranger rescued after near-fatal attack. Claims giant bear saved his life. Guardian bear or delirious hallucination. Ranger's story sparks online debate. Wild hero, myth or miracle. Reporters gathered outside the hospital gates like vultures drawn to blood. But to Ethan, their questions weren't just invasive. They were wrong. They all asked, "What did you think you saw?" But Ethan knew. He hadn't imagined the giant shadow rising above him as the wolves closed in. He hadn't dreamed the brute strength that drove them off. He hadn't fantasized the warmth of fur against his bloodied body as he passed out under the trees. The bear, Shadow, had been real. Weeks later, Ethan's body had healed enough to move without a cane, though the doctors warned him not to push too hard. But something deeper than the physical pulled him back to the forest. Not obligation, not routine. Something unfinished. Early one morning, with the mist still low and the sunlight just breaking across the treetops, he parked his jeep at the same remote ridge. The scars beneath his shirt still throbbed, but he welcomed the pain. It grounded him. He had brought a pack full of apples, honey-soaked oats, fish, and a single motion-activated trail camera. "If you're still out there," he muttered, kneeling beside a rock where he'd first collapsed weeks ago, "I owe you everything." He mounted the camera high on a tree trunk, angled toward the forest opening, and scattered the food below. Then he waited. Nothing happened that day, or the next, or the one after. Every few days, Ethan would return, replace the memory card, refresh the food, watch hours of footage showing raccoons, deer, and even a curious fox, but never the bear, never Shadow. Doubt crept in like cold through the cracks of a cabin window. Was he chasing a ghost? But then came the foggy morning. It was early, still and thick with mist. Ethan parked as usual, his breath turning to vapor as he stepped into the trees. Something felt different. At the base of the feeding rock, apples were gone. The oats, too. And then he froze. Prints. Large, distinct, unmistakable bear tracks. Fresh, deep. His heart thundered as he knelt beside them, pressing his hand into the earth beside one. Massive. Powerful. But more than that, real. Adrenaline pulsed through his veins as he snatched the camera and rushed home. That night, as he scrolled through frame after frame, his hands trembled. Then, finally, a shadow in the mist. The camera had captured it only once, just the edge of a hulking figure beyond the trees. A thick paw, the curve of a broad shoulder, motion blurred but impossible to mistake. It wasn't just any bear. It was him, Shadow. Ethan knew he had to tell someone. A few days later, he sat across from Dr. Lena Moritz, a wildlife biologist from the State Department, at a local ranger station. She peered over her glasses at the photo he showed her. "I know that pattern," she said slowly. "That's not just any bear." She pulled up her laptop, brows furrowing as she tapped through folders of archived data. "Years ago," she explained, "your ranger unit helped raise an orphaned cub. His mother was shot by poachers. He was barely a few weeks old. He stayed in a controlled sanctuary until he was strong enough to return to the wild. His name was Thorn. That name ring a bell?" Ethan's stomach sank. "Thorn. We took care of him for nearly a year. I used to sneak him extra food. He always followed me around. Dr. Moritz nodded. He was fitted with a GPS collar when released, but we lost contact with the signal about 5 months ago. The device must have failed. She turned the screen toward him. Could Shadow be Thorn? Everything clicked in Ethan's mind, the familiarity, the gentleness, the reason the bear hadn't attacked. Shadow hadn't been a stranger. He had been family. That evening, Ethan couldn't stay away. He loaded his truck with a new pack, this time with a single item he hadn't touched in years, a small metal tag, worn, scratched, and engraved with the name Thorn. He'd kept it after the bear's release, tucked away in a drawer, too sentimental to discard. The forest was quieter than usual as he approached the feeding spot. The wind rustled through pine needles overhead, and a raven called out in the distance. He placed the tag on a smooth rock right where the bear tracks had appeared days before. Then, silence. But not for long. From the shadows beyond the brush, a low grunt echoed. Ethan froze, turning slowly. There, he stood, massive, still, watching. The bear's black coat shimmered with dew, its breath visible in the chilled air. No huff of aggression, no shifting to charge, just presence, recognition. Their eyes met, not as man and beast, but as two souls who had crossed paths once in youth, and now again in fate. Ethan's voice cracked as he whispered, "Thorn." The bear stepped forward slowly, not threateningly, just close enough. It sniffed the air, then, delicately, nuzzled the small tag with its nose. Then, without a sound, the bear turned and padded back into the forest. No fanfare, no dramatic roar, just the rhythm of paw steps fading into the trees. Ethan remained still, blinking back tears. It wasn't just a reunion. It was closure, proof, gratitude, and perhaps, on some deeper level, forgiveness. He stood for a long time before finally whispering to the quiet forest, "Some guardians walk on two legs. Others leave paw prints behind." The sun broke through the trees then, golden light spilling like a blessing over the path where the bear had vanished. And with it, the final chapter of a story few would ever believe, but one that Ethan Carter would carry forever.